I was miserable. My wife was expecting our first child, so she was going on mat leave. I was the only. Saturday, I'm sitting down. I'm actually sulking at that point. I'm really trying to figure out what's going to be next. And I decided to open my email, and I actually read the job description. I was like, holy shit, this kind of looks interesting. I sent my CV. A week later, I had an offer from the AMF, and I started working. Yeah, the AMF has actually two real objectives. The first one is to foster efficient markets. All right, so they have to make sure that the markets are efficient. But the other one, yes, is to protect investors.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And today we are interviewing my friend Gabriel Araish. How is it going, man?
It's going really well. And just for the record, it's Araish.
Araish. Yeah, thank you.
Araish.
I should have checked.
Don't worry about it, man. You're not the first or last that butchered my name, and it's I'm very cool with it. It actually gives us a story for future times. So
exactly. and the thing is that I'm really excited to have you on today because we're going to talk about a really interesting and fun topic, which is the framework, the legality for fundraising and raising capital for real estate deals. And so before we actually jump into this, I just want to remind everyone who's listening diligently every week, please share it with a friend, subscribe. It's really important. It helps us. And also there's a lot of people around you who could benefit from this conversation because this is going to be a great one packed with a lot of gems from Gabriel. So please share it with someone who could benefit. So Gabriel, you are an expert, a coach, very knowledgeable in that arena, as you've worked for the AMF in Quebec. You, in fact, wrote a book about it, The Secrets of Securities Compliance, which I read before this interview, and I highly recommend to everyone. You can find it on Amazon. You get it in 3 days, and boom, boom, then you become more knowledgeable about it. So to jump into it, rather, how in the world did you get to work for the AMF? That's rather uncommon.
Yeah, it's actually an accident. So I was, I started my career as a CPA working for KPMG, did kind of the audit thing while I was getting my CPA letters. Actually, back then it was only CA. That's how old I am now. But and what happened is I wanted to get out of the auditing world. I quickly found out that it was not for me. Learned a lot. It was a great experience, and I still carry a lot of the knowledge with me in my deals today. But I kind of skipped and jumped into the private sector. I worked for a company, and maybe for like 6 months max. But after 3 months, I knew that this was not for me. I was miserable. My wife was expecting our first child, so she was going on mat leave. I was the only breadwinner, and I can see, that the finish line, if you will, with that entity. And it was scary. It was really scary because if I didn't have a job and she was on mat leave, then we had a really big problem. So started looking for jobs. Nothing was kind of, appealing to me. And one day I just get this call at work from a headhunter and saying, hey, I have this employment opportunity. Are you interested? I'm like, I have like 50 headhunters calling me every week. It's just, I'm fed up. So, but you know what I'll do for you? Because she was really nice on the phone. I don't really remember her name, but there was something different about the way she introduced herself and introduced the situation that I said, you know what, just email me and I'll send it to my network. That's what I'll do for you. Nice. Right. So I get home and this is like a Friday. And so Saturday, I'm sitting down, I'm actually sulking at that point. I'm really trying to figure out what's going to be next. And I decided to open my email, and I actually read the job description. I was like, holy shit, this kind of looks interesting. And I called her up and I said, you know what? I don't know that I have all the qualifications that you're asking for, but headhunters always ask for more than really is required. So I said, I have an interest for this. Is it okay if I submit my CV? And she's like, let me call. And she goes, send me your CV. I'll call and ask. And finally said, yeah, they'll meet you. And that's kind of how it happened. I sent my CV. a week later, I had an offer from the AMF and I started working. And it was 8 years with them, 7 years plus a sabbatical, because I took the last year off to kind of just figure out if I can become an entrepreneur on my own. And they were great years. They weren't easy years. They were rough years, especially the last couple of ones, because as I was a CPA that ended up in a position that was typically reserved for lawyers, but I was strong enough on both legal side and accounting that I actually gave them a benefit in getting that promotion. They did grant
Yeah.
it to me, but that didn't really go well with a lot of the lawyers there. So it was a rough year, but I learned a lot about myself in that process and had to grow pretty quickly in order to fit in within the confines of the legal world. So
Mhm.
so that's kind of how I ended up at DMF, and it's been great. Had a good time. Learned a lot. And part of which is why I wrote this book. It's because in my sabbatical year, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I always had this bucket list of writing a book. And throughout my years at DMF, I could see so many small and medium enterprise like owners that kind of just ended up in hot water. Not necessarily in jail. Everybody thinks that you go to jail. Sometimes you do. Like if if your intentions are bad and you commit fraud, then you will and probably deserve to go to jail. But in the context of raising money, what's considered quote unquote illegally, there's different thresholds, if you will,
Yeah.
of punishments. But a lot of them get into the hot water and get these fines and penalties, and the reason this happens is because most of them don't know that there are rules that govern capital raising. And if they don't know that there's rules, it's actually not an excuse to the law, right? It's like, I'll give you an example. It's if you're driving a car, you don't know the rules of the road, and you just go through a red light and then you get caught by the police. Will the police still give you a ticket? Or if you tell them, well, I didn't know I had to stop at a red light, I never read the book.
No.
Right. It doesn't work. It's the same thing in law. Well, it's silly,
Yeah.
but people think that it's different for some reason. Well, I didn't know. Well, I didn't know is not an excuse,
No.
at least not to a judge. So I decided to write a book for these individuals that don't know this, because I'm a small business owner. I'm sure you are, and there's a lot of your listeners probably are too. And the thing is you wear many hats. You're the CEO, you're the CFO, you're the lawyer, you're everybody, right? At the beginning, as you're building and as you can start generating income to be, outsourcing some of these tasks. So because you're wearing all these different hats, it's kind of hard to become an expert in every single, under every single hat. So this is why most of these entrepreneurs get into hot water. And you'll see that most of the people that get into hot water with the AMF are usually the smaller companies. They're never kind of your big companies. Why? Because they have their own compliance departments, they have staff, they have big time lawyers on retainers. It's a different ballgame. So that's why I decided to write this book. And it's very simple. I tried to verbalize it in non-legal lingo as much as possible, because it is very difficult to read. Even if you do read the law, you probably won't understand it the first time. Like I've had to read it over 7 years to really start grasping most of it. But yeah, that's kind of the story here.
Yeah, and hence how you became an expert in it, and why I'm so excited for this conversation, because a lot of us here are making real estate deals, and at some point we tap out on our funds and we're looking for partners, and sometimes those partners will be bringing capital, sometimes partners will be a contractor who will take care of the renovations and so on and so forth. It's not necessarily just capital, but I was hoping to start with actually a very basic situation. Is like, what I have an 8 unit under contract. I can put 50K, but I need another 150K. What is it that I can and cannot do in order to solicitate or not? It's like, how do we go about it?
It's a delicate question, because it's always a case by case basis. But the fundamentals are that in theory, you are not allowed to solicit funds. All right. So if you want to raise money, the rule says you have to use a prospectus. A prospectus is something that large companies will use, public companies mostly. And you actually, once you issue these shares under a prospectus, you will become a publicly traded company. So obviously, this is very expensive. There's a lot of compliance. This is something that most people won't and cannot do, whether because of money, resources, whatever the case may be, or time. So, but there are exceptions to this rule, and those are called exemptions. And some of these exemptions are, and I'm not gonna cover a lot of this, but the main exemption that's covered, or two of them, is family and friends, and then there's the accredited investor. Family and friends, I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's, you what you think is family and friends is not exactly what the law considers family and friends. So it's really anybody who's direct relationship to you, like your parents, maybe your grandparents, and then your children, and that's pretty much it, for the most part. Or your wife, obviously your wife.
So it's vertical,
100% vertical,
above and under in terms of generation.
Yeah, and you know what? And it sucks because most of us, I think, always have this rich uncle, right? or rich aunt. Like nobody has a rich dad. It's like my rich uncle. Well, an uncle, unfortunately, is not considered family under securities law. Wow. It's not in the definition. So if you want to raise money from friends and family, that's kind of the route to take. But there's steps to take in order to raise them, and we can't cover all of that there. There's forms to fill out. There's information to gather. So that's kind of premise one for friends and family. So I want to, and close personal friends is another thing. So it's friends. And when I say family, it's close. Sorry. When I say friends, it's close personal friends. And that too is not like you can't have 14 close personal friends. Like the EMF at one point is going to be like, wait a minute,
Yeah. And how do they define friend? What is there like?
There is no definition.
You know them, or like it's hard to qualify.
Yeah, it's not a definition. There's kind of like a guidance, if you will, in it's not in the rule. It's in what we call a companion policy, which is guidance. Typically, it's things like your relationship, how long it's been a relationship, the type of relationship it is, the trust that they have in you, if they know what you do for a living, if they know that you're capable of doing what you're saying you're going to do. There's a lot of check marks. And these are, again, they're guidance. So even if you fill these 4 check marks, I think there's 4 of them, then it's still subjective, basically. So you have to document. And the more you document, the more your case is going to be defendable. So, and I cover this in the book where, how to do this so that if you are questioned, once you raise money from a close personal friend, you're able to demonstrate that you've done everything you can in order to demonstrate that that's the case, to back or to, see why you cover your ass, basically. So that's what it is for close personal friends. The one I want to spend more time on is accredited investor, because that's the real exemption you need to lean on. If you're going to be serious about doing real estate investments, like it's great if you can borrow money from your uncle or your aunt or your friends or whatever, but you're not going to do this and become and scale. If you want to scale, you got to start using strangers' money, and these strangers need to be accredited investors. So accredited investors are basically wealthy people. They either have a salary of $200,000 a year for the last 2 years, as well as an expected salary of $200,000 for the coming year. That's individually. If you're a couple, then it's $300,000 between the two. So the clear example here is if Alex, let's say you make $150,000 and your wife makes $150,000. Individually, you are both not considered accredited investors, but together, 300,000 is hit, you would be accredited investors. So that's one of the thresholds. That's what we call the income method, if you will, or income calculation. But then there's also the asset calculation, which is if you don't qualify. So let's say you don't make $200,000 or anywhere near that, which I guess is most of the population. Then there's the $1 million net worth test. So the asset test that we call. So it's if you have $1 million of net worth, and net worth means basically all of your assets that are considered to be liquid. So this excludes your primary residence. By the way, everybody thinks that they're millionaires because they have a house that's either paid off and that's obviously exploded in value these days. But it needs to exclude your primary residence and any illiquid investments. And real estate, like even if you have multiple assets, they're considered illiquid. So really, you need to have a net worth. It's mostly your brokerage accounts. If you have life insurance policies that you can cash out, that's what would fit in that $1 million threshold. If you want to include all this real estate in that, then there's another test. That's the $5 million net worth test, and then that would come into play. Obviously, I say net because it's net assets, so it's really net of all debt. So you got to remove all your mortgages, any lines of credit against all that stuff, and that's kind of the guidance along what an accredited investor is and who it is. Now the question is, does that make sense? Because I'll give you an example. If you win the lottery tomorrow morning, you're considered an accredited investor, right? You've made whatever, 10, 15, $20 million. does that make you any more financially savvy than
Not at all.
a
No.
CPA, for example, that's always made $125,000 a year for the last 10 years, that's been auditing these public companies for the last 15, 20 years? It doesn't, right?
Mhm.
But the spirit of the law, the reason it applies to the wealthy is twofold. Okay, because I get this question a lot, and I want to kind of clear the air here. It's because with that kind of money, you are it is assumed that you have the means to pay an advisor, financial advisor, to go through the investment thesis with you prior to investing. That's one. And
Okay.
obviously, the second one is that it's presumed that you have the financial capacity to take that type of loss. So those are kind of the two reasons why it's really a numbers game, and it has nothing to do with your knowledge base and whatnot. But I do
Mhm.
agree that there's many people that do not qualify as AIs that would be very capable of investing should they have the funds.
Yeah, and that goes both ways, as you said, in terms of knowledge and experience, but they may not hit the threshold. I would understand that the primary residence is not taken into account, but that the rest of a portfolio of rental properties and multifamily wouldn't count either is, I find, completely ludicrous, because some people are not very diversified and they're not into publicly traded securities, but they have $10 million worth of multifamily, and you would think that these people would qualify
They
as
do.
investors.
Well, they would at 10 million, because the 5 million threshold would
Okay,
be
yeah.
met, right? So it really it's because I can't tell you that it's 100% excluded, because the way it's worded, it's that it has to be liquid, right? It has to be quickly. It's like saying that and in our market, it could be argued that I can sell a multiplex in 3 days, right? But
Yeah,
the premise behind real estate typically is that it's a longer process to go from asset to cash,
to liquid.
and
Yeah.
versus a stock where you just press a button and you've gone from asset to cash in like an instant. I say it's excluded just because I'd rather you being conservative than not.
Mhm.
Now, if you want to include it, because at the end of the day, this is almost a self assessment. There's you're when you're raising money from an accredited investor, there's like a questionnaire that they have to fill out, and
Yeah.
that you have to fill out as well. And whatever is there is what's going to be stated. The real problem becomes when you're questioned by the EMF, and it's your responsibility as the issuer, the person who is selling shares of their entity, or the person who is actually raising the capital. It's your responsibility to make sure that your investor does qualify for an exemption. So if they say yes, 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 I'm an AI, great, now prove it. And to prove it, then this is where you have to ask all these questions. And again, we can't go through it all here. And I'm happy to dig deeper in this if you want, or if your listeners want to, is either under another format or under another podcast. But
Yeah.
it would take a while to kind of educate on that process. But so that's kind of the two exemptions that are the most commonly used. But if you want to really become a pro, AI, the accredited investor, is the way to go. You have to learn to use that one. Now,
Mhm.
the other aspect of raising money, this is the exemption to raise capital. We call this a prospectus exemption because it's an exception to using the prospectus to raise money. But there's also registration exemption. So typically to raise money or to solicit, because raising money isn't the physical act of receiving a check, a wire transfer into your account. Okay, the what capital raising is at the core under the Securities Act is the act of solicitation. So if I say, hey, Alex, I got this deal. Do you want to partner up with me? I need $200,000, and I'll give you 8% on it. That's solicitation, and solicitation qualifies as raising money under the Securities Act. So just that, I would be offside if I don't know that you're an AI or you're not, falling under any of the exemptions. So,
Mhm.
and you see this a lot, right? Because we're all part of these social media groups now about around investors and wholesalers and retailers and whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
There's so many, and you see it almost. I see it on a daily basis. I've even seen on Kijiji people saying, "Hey, I got a deal. I'm raising money. I'll pay you 10%." And I'm like,
Wow.
what are you doing? Like you're gonna you're gonna get in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because it's not their fault. Like I can't
Mhm.
blame them. They're doing what they feel is necessary in order for them to go to the next level. So their thought process of raising money to get a bigger deal is the right one. I really can't blame an individual like that. I actually, admire them for their courage, right? It takes balls to
Yeah.
do that. And And but unfortunately, there are rules, and if you get I don't want to say caught, but if your situation is addressed by the AMF and you are considered guilty of illegal solicitation, which is really what it is, it's not necessarily going to be a big deal. Like it might be a $5,000 fine if you haven't raised any money, you've just been advertising, for example. The problem is that there's always a public decision in order to be able to fine you, and that public decision remains public forever. So if you Google, if you did this, then, and I would Google your name, probably that would come up. And then, so in the future, if you're trying to raise money, even if you learn to do it the right way, it's just always going to be the stain on your record that if you're raising money from strangers, if they have, 6 deals to choose from and they like yours and another one, it's weeded down to 2, and the returns are more or less the same for them versus the risk, obviously, then maybe they pick the person that doesn't have a stain. I'm not saying they will, but it's just saying, like, why would you take a chance of having a stain on your record if you can do it the right way from the get-go? So that's what it comes down to.
But what I find difficult, and I kind of want to make it clear for listeners, is that then how do you do it? Because realistically, like, okay, you can go with accredited investors, let's say the doctors and the lawyers that we may know, but at some point it's more of the general public. So
yes,
because as you said, like we see almost on a daily basis people going on Facebook and Instagram saying, hey, I have a deal under contract, I'm looking for 200K, let me send me a DM to partner up. Are you saying that that is technically illegal, right?
It could be. Actually, the second step is I DM you, and then what happens, right? And you're going to talk to me about your deal, you're going to tell me about my returns. As soon as you give me projected returns or what I'm going to make for my money in exchange of shares, it's that solicitation. And I would venture to guess that a lot of these people that do what you just said probably do get calls from the AMF, because what people don't know, or maybe they do and they ignore it, but the AMF is also not this like super archaic entity, like let's say CRA would be, for example, or Revenue Quebec, where they still work with faxes and whatnot. But they actually have teams that are that all they do all day is scour the internet with keywords and they all they do is look for this. So be my guest, and if you want to try it or challenge it, go for it. But I'm telling you, I didn't have access to that department, but I know what happens.
Yeah.
So just be careful when you're doing that. So the right way of doing things is to, first of all, have a securities attorney on your team. And when I say on your team, doesn't mean that you have to hire them, to be literally in your company, but just, have them on retainer. And when you want to raise money, have them draw up your contracts, your agreements. You can't really have passive investors too. That's the other thing, because if you have passive investors, that's what creates the registration requirement. And the registration requirement means you need to have a license to raise money, which none of us will get, right? So if you're not going to do this, the only way to really raise money, even from an accredited investor, would be to render them active in your entity. So they have to be active investors. Now, does that mean that they have to be on the on the work site every day and using hammers? No, not necessarily. But this is where I can't tell you how to do it because I'm not an attorney, but securities attorney will have more or less an idea of what the main points are that you need to have in there to render your investor active. And my best guess would be things like that they have to approve all budgets, that they have to be involved in the decision making at more levels than you would think, including the management decisions and whatnot.
And that they make more contributions than just a financial one at the upstart. Like, are they referring contractors? Are they helping making connections? Do they come on site sometimes?
Anything that would be considered active is. But the other thing is, if they have specific, like if you're doing business with a real estate agent, like he's your investor and he's been in real estate for the last 20 years, that's actually considered a good thing. And they that's going to remove your, like, even if they're not as active, it might actually be helpful because they have knowledge. Because the fear for the MF is that you have this investor that's parking money and he's staying home doing something, but has no clue how real estate works and how you're going to exit and how they're going to make money out of this. They just got, you ended up fluffing their nuts basically with the interest rate or whatever return you're going to give. Like, I'm going to give you 25% return. So they get excited. Yeah, I'm going to give you my money because I'm only making 4%. And so that's their biggest fear, is they don't want people like that to kind of lose their money. So
originally they're there to protect investors and protect the market. Let's not paint them in a corner as the evil organization. They are here to protect the public, and that makes sense.
There's actually, the AMF has actually two real objectives. The first one is to foster efficient markets. All right, so they have to make sure that the markets are efficient. But the other one, is to protect investors. So and protecting investors sometimes means protecting them from themselves. And this is why these rules are in place. Now, it can be argued that these rules are overkill and whatnot. And listen, for those who don't know, I've moved to the U.S., so I don't live in Canada anymore. I don't live in Quebec, and I certainly don't raise funds there anymore. So there's significant differences, and it is a lot easier to raise capital here in the U.S. than it is in Canada in general. So I get it. I do get that the rules are, I guess, maybe sometimes overkill, but it is what it is. The rules are there, and they are there. You have to respect them. So the question is, how can I take advantage of the way the rules are written in order to make my business the most scalable possible?
Okay. So I'm just going to go back and throw an example that I kind of already touched on, because I feel like that's very close to a lot of people's reality who are listening. So you do get a deal under contract, and you go on Facebook and Instagram and say, hey, I have this deal. You can't do that. So you can't. You simply can't do that. No.
Don't do Facebook. Don't do Kijiji. Don't do it. Your best bet is always going to be like physical networking, because what you say face to face to someone, even though you might be offside or on whatever, it's not traceable. First of all,
it's hearsay.
And I'm not saying do it. What I'm saying is that the way I did it was I would go out networking and I would just talk about my situation. I wouldn't ask anybody for money. Hey man, I just got this contract, 8 unit. This is the plan. We're gonna do this, that. I did the math, and once we exit, the total returns are gonna be 40%. That's it.
Yeah.
And I thought, but now if they solicit me and say, hey man, what do you need investors for this and that? Then the next question is, well, listen, it depends, because there's rules around investors. So, are you an accredited investor? Well, what is an accredited investor? If that's the case, I got to educate. If yes, I am, because they are, well, then I would ask subsequent questions like, okay, can you validate why you're an AI? And then once I know they're an AI, then I can talk to them about the deal, and then structure it with a securities attorney to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. That's it. Yeah. That's the simple, efficient way of doing it. Is it more complex than going and post on social media? 100% it is, but the rules are there, and that's how you respect them. So for me, it's always about the deal, because and for those of you who don't know, this is just kind of, like I said, a sidebar, but it's not you that's ever raising money. Because if you think you're the one who's raising money, this is why you are failing at raising money. It's your deal that's raising money. And if your deal is really good, the money will come. And when the money comes, it's about how you treat it and how you treat the situation. And treating the situation is respecting the rules. So like I said, in my case, I've been investing in the US for the better part of the last 10 years. I've stopped investing in Quebec a long time ago, just based on the way I was taught to buy real estate. And like I'm getting deals at 12, 15, 18% caps, right? Which you guys would have, I guess, a financial orgasm over if you got that in Quebec. So to me, an 18% return, or let's call it a 12% return, just to be even more, closer to the Quebec market, even though we're still far. Money just runs at me. I get to choose who invests in my deals. Yeah. And so it's about creating the deal and not necessarily just finding a deal. And but when you do that and the deal attracts the money, then all you got to do is play by the rules. And hey, are you an AI? And not afraid to say no. Like, I know it's hard at the beginning. And this is what I keep telling all the new investors. Like, it's hard. Your first deal, to raise money for your first deal, like your real deal, not like your 4 unit, but your first, 12, 15 unit. It's hard. It's hard because you don't know many people. Maybe you don't have many AIs in your entourage. So you got to work for that. That means attend as many networking events as you can, and, talk about what you do every single day. And eventually you'll meet people that have money. They'll be interested in you, asking you questions. And then all you got to do is, when you do have deals under contract, is talk about them. And then partner up with people who have done this before, maybe, and who have money that can put the money in and kind of mentor you through the process. And yeah, sometimes maybe you give away. I think, you know what, and this is maybe my, I guess it's a judgment, and I shouldn't do this because I don't like judging, but the feeling I get is that specifically for Quebec, because I've never really worked in Ontario and Western Canada, but what I've noticed about Quebecers in general, and when I say Quebecers, is anybody who works out of Quebec and does deals in Quebec, it's that there's this like reluctance to want to give up a percentage of your deal. There's like people will give it, but they're thinking I'm going to give away 10, 15, like give away 85% of your deal if you have to someone who's going to come in with money and help you get this deal done, because keeping 15% of something is a lot better than keeping 0% or 100% of nothing. So like you wouldn't believe how many times I've given away like almost everything, and people are like, well, you're crazy. Like, I go, no, because I've done this deal, and then next time I bring a deal to the same investor, he'll actually take less because he knows it'll get done and he'll make money. It's just a way to attract people and to know. You want to know if you're comfortable working with them. You want to know if the integrity is there. For me, integrity is the most important. Like,
and if you deliver,
well, I know I'm going to deliver, but will they deliver? Will they actually show up with the money at the table when it's time? Things like that. But 100%, like, don't be afraid. And a lot of you probably miss out on a lot of money because you're not willing to just give up more. And there's nobody is. If someone has enough disposable income to actually invest in your deal, they'd be stupid not to take something like 60%, 80%. And don't think you're giving up control, because you can give away 60 or 80% of the cash without necessarily giving up 60, 80% of the voting shares, right? Those are two separate things. So talk to your lawyers, because you can keep control of the votes while giving them a larger chunk of the return. And that's something that's going to help them. So
definitely.
But again, do it always with a securities attorney. And I stress securities attorney. Don't go see a real estate attorney. They all think they know shit. They don't know jack. There's like maybe one or two real estate attorneys in Quebec that actually understand securities law. Go see a securities lawyer. You know, like if you're getting, you know, if you're getting divorced, are you going to go see a real estate lawyer or a litigation lawyer? The answer is no. Why? Because that's not their expertise. The same thing. Real estate and securities are like two separate vectors. But if you work with both, then you have a really strong product.
I just wanted to go back to a point that you made in the book, which I found really interesting, and it might be helpful to listeners, is that you said, like, if you engage in a relationship with an investor and for some reason the AMF asks questions, they're going to start obviously with your investor, not with you. And and they're going to ask him, like, how did the relationship start? And they base it on what he says, not what you say. Because you might say, oh, I've known him for years, he's a longtime friend. And then if they ask him, not knowing, he might say, oh, I've met him 3 months ago at a networking event, and he said he had a deal and he was asking me if I want to participate. And those are two very different stories. The impact is widely different. And I was hoping you could explain, like, how does that work if they actually go and question an investor?
Well, I've never been questioned, but they would basically call them up, say, hey, we're calling from the EMF, we've such and such, we're aware that you invested in this, and we're just doing our homework here. Nothing. They probably put them in, like, I've never been part of this conversation, never been allowed to be part of this conversation, but I do know that they call them because I see the end result, or I saw the end result of these type of investigations. So and the way it sounds like it works is they'll call the investor, just introduce themselves and say, hey, we just have a couple questions, about this investment that you made. And here's the thing, and this is where people don't really realize, but if you've ever been questioned by the police, like we're talking real police, right? They come and knock at your door. Hey, we have a few questions for you. Just saying this, you already feel like you're guilty. Like, you're on your defensive, your hearts, you get these heart palpitations and you're like, what's going on? What did I do?
What did I do? Yeah.
Right. So what did I do? And in that context, your mindset is, well, I did nothing wrong here. Your instinct is always to tell the truth, right? That's what it is.
To cooperate.
The only time you're going to lie is if you've lied before, because if you always tell the truth, then you have nothing to hide, or you don't have to remember anything really, right? When you think about it. So So they'll question him and say, "Hey, how do you know this gentleman?" And they'll just make you talk, and you'll tell your story. Well, we met at school, we were in the same class, and then we kind of lost touch for the last 7-8 years, and then I met him at the soccer field. Our kids played soccer one against the other, and we were shooting the breeze, and he was telling me about this real estate deal, and that's kind of how we started talking again. I looked at his documents or his PowerPoint presentation, found it interesting, and that's it. And basically told me to send money to the notary, and I did. Okay. And then they'll keep asking questions, but they'll ask questions that are seeded because they want to hear certain things from you to understand if in their mind their checklist is crossed or not. And that's it. So saying you've known someone for 20 years and you've met them 20 years ago and then lost touch for 15 years and then, rejuvenated that relationship 4 years ago, doesn't mean you've known them 20 years. And there is no set amount of years, because if I've known you for only 2 years, but our 2 years together have been meaningful enough or more meaningful than someone who's known someone for 10 years, that's also going to play. And the problem we have as investors and issuers is that we have no, I guess it's all a gray area. It's all subjective. We have no knowledge of what they're looking for. Just like this, how many friends and family can I raise money from? Well, we don't know. It doesn't say. Yeah. But my suggestion is try and stay under 10. Like that's, and I'm not saying it's the case or not. That's how I would operate, because I've seen cases where when there's been considered, that's a lot of friends or that's a lot of family. They would, these are things that I would hear. So then they would start questioning. So, if you have 15, brothers, then, somewhere a red flag is going to get raised.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. And for everyone to be aware that this is how it starts. And I've actually heard recently of someone who, exactly as you described, like got the call from the AMF and started to ask questions. And after a few minutes, he just said, "Look, those are very good questions. I'd feel more comfortable if my lawyer was here. Can we reschedule?" And they did.
And that was already smarter than 98% of the people, because most people would have just answered the questions to the best of their knowledge and would have probably incriminated themselves. So, I don't know who this is, and I hope that it all works out. But chances are, is I don't know how the AMF reached them. Is it because they posted on the internet or whatnot? But it's chances are they've done something wrong, and they're probably going. If they've been called, this is going to be pursued. There's like that person, in my opinion, and I'd really love to know the follow up of this. But my best guess, and I'm gonna just kind of throw it out there, is they're gonna get a $5,000 fine saying that they did some illegal solicitation.
Okay. Good to know. I will follow up with you offline, because we're not going to be sharing the story to the public. But this is so interesting, man. I could go on for hours listening to your knowledge, because it touches our everyday reality as real estate investors. And I think a lot of people are unaware of what is it technically that they can do and could not do, and what they could get a fine for. So you've been sharing a lot of this knowledge. I also understand, as you said, like you're in the US. You also now coach people. Can you tell us a little bit more about your program?
Yeah, so I work with the mentor that helped me kind of get to where I am today after making multiple mistakes as a young buck in the real estate industry. It teaches real estate or coaches real estate to people who want to buy real estate in the U.S. without using any of their money or credit. So that's definitely possible. It works really well. I grew up through that program. I'm still in the program. When you think about it, you're really always learning. But I've done really well, and he's actually asked me to start coaching with him and teaching some of his, I guess, lower level students, so he can concentrate on the bigger deals and the creative financing type of strategies. So yeah, so we have this program, and it's all on Zoom now. We used to do all these live events. Everything since COVID has been on Zoom, and it's been working out really well. So yeah, it's a great program. Our beginner or entry level is like basically we teach you how to buy a 3 to 5 unit, just one property, 3 to 5 units, without using any of your money or credit, and you can do that from the comfort of your own home, in your underwear, from anywhere in the world. That's kind of the fun part. Yeah. And the beauty of this program, which is something because I've been I've joined so many programs in the past, and the reason I like this one is because it's success based. So there is no time limit. If it takes you, 1 month to get your 3 to 5 units, great, then you're done. If it takes you 1 year, then it take 1 year. If it takes you 10 years, because life gets in the way, then it'll take you 10 years. The promise is that we'll help you get there. And so So that's what we do. We actually, and as a group, we're three guys that work in this now, and we actually have a podcast too called the Big Fat Real Estate Checks podcast. And like I told you earlier, it's been doing really well. $200,000.
Yeah, you guys have been
a
booming.
Month.
Yeah, huge.
$200,000 a month, close to 1,500 5-star reviews now. And we've only been at it for like just about a year and a half or so.
Wow.
Episode 137 or something along those lines. No guests so far. So maybe I think we might have to start getting some because the topics are becoming harder and harder to come by. But we have a good time doing it, and there's some exciting things happening to us that are gonna make this thing explode even more. So we're looking forward to it. But if any of the listeners are interested in learning about our programs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a link to share with them so that they get a promo code, because these prices are going to increase very soon with what's coming. But I'm glad to kind of honor these pricings for now. And that's it. And we're starting a private equity fund, so we're raising big money now. We're getting in the private equity fund world. We're going to do two I guess, private placement memorandums, one of 20 million, one of 30 million. We're just finalizing our deals with our fund managers and capital raisers. And hopefully we're going to get going in the next 30 to 60 days. And that's all for investment in the US. Obviously, we're going to be doing private lending, multifamily optimizations, a lot of fun stuff. And then we're planning a $50 million hotel fund as well, probably sometime at either end of the year or next year.
Jesus, you're busy, man. Well, thanks for taking the time really even just to record this. I can understand your schedule is booked for a while.
You'd be surprised, because my first job is a stay-at-home dad. I actually take care of my kids. My daughter's an elite figure skater. I'm at the arena like 4 hours a day, every day. My son is at soccer at night. I do that. So no, that was the main thing. And I'm not as busy as it sounds, because like I said, I'm not afraid of giving away pieces in order to be able to have a better life. For me, my time is so much more important than money. Few people understand this, but it is. And actually, if you guys want a book recommendation, that's something that's helped me. It's the book is called Who Not How.
Oh yeah, I have it here.
So find the who's in your life that can help you get there. And this is why our private equity fund, we want to do that on our own first. And we're like, no way, like we're not spending all this time raising money and managing. No. So we just want to find the deals and underwrite them. So we found someone, give them a piece of the pie, and they're going to take care of all that administrative stuff that just we have no interest in. So Who Not How, guys. It's probably the biggest lesson I learned.
Yeah, it's a fabulous book. I read it last year, and it was a game changer. Yeah. Hey, Gabriel, thank you so much for all this knowledge. It's been really good. Where can people find out more about you? What's the best way to reach out?
I think Twitter, LinkedIn are the best. I'm on Facebook as well. You can try reach out over there. But I'll give you, I guess, I'm on Instagram too, guys. I'm over 40. It's just not, I'm a little bit challenged when it comes to posting pictures and whatnot. I might have to get some manager to take care of all that, but I don't have a big presence, but I do respond. And if you need any help with anything, I'm happy to do so. And I'll provide you with my links to Alex, so that
I'll put it all in the show notes. Exactly. Anyone is interested, it'll be in the show notes, and there'll be all the information there, and including your program. If anyone is interested about investing in the US, that might be a game changer for them. It's
worth it. It's under $1,500, and you get 3 full days. It's mind blowing. You're gonna get so much value. You're gonna be like, you're gonna run out of that course like the lady from IKEA and in the commercial, like start the car, because you're gonna feel like you've robbed us, and
because you're really stealing.
It truly is the case, and anybody who's attended will tell you the same. So but like I said, I'm also gonna give you a promo code for your listeners, so that it knocks off a little bit more, just to make it sweeter. But I do appreciate you having me here. It's always a pleasure to talk about securities compliance. It's a dry subject. Most people don't like it, but it is reality. And if you want to scale in the real estate world specifically, it's you must know this. You have to know this. And even if you're not an issuer, if you're just an investor, super important to understand the rules, because you're going to be able to question people who are raising money from you. And if they're not respecting the rules when raising money from you, then you know what type of issuer they are. What else are they doing wrong is the question I would ask myself as an investor. So for me, both sides of the equation are important, both the issuer because they're responsible, and the investor because they need to know who they're working with.
Well said. On this note, thank you very much, Gabriel, for today. This was a slightly longer episode, but well worth it. To anyone listening, remember, stay active. Real estate is a marathon, not a sprint. So keep researching your market, make some offers, and tune in next week. Thank you for joining, and talk to you soon. Peace out.